For years, baristas have been using their coffee pucks to decide whether they made a good extraction or not. Today, I'm going to determine whether a wet puck or a dry puck is a good thing or not. We used to make coffee, fill the basket, do a lot of tricks, and then we would knock the puck onto the bench. And if you could pick it up and break it into a few pieces, you'd be pretty happy with that. And these days, everyone's asking me, does it really matter? Does it matter that my pucks are wet? Should they be drier than they are? It's not uncommon to see a really sloppy knockbox, a puck stuck to the shower screen, and coffee everywhere. Does that really matter? Why is it happening? Let's find out today. Now, before we even make a coffee, let's make sure you've got the right aged coffee. Now remember that really fresh coffee is actually more absorbent. Ideally, we're using that coffee between 7 to 28 days from its roast date. So before you go ahead and make a coffee, check that your coffee is actually within a good age range and it's being degassed. If you're using old coffee, it's less absorbent, the water's going to get through faster, and that can result in a sloppier puck. So make sure the age of your coffee is right before you even get started. So you've got the right age coffee. Now we're going to work on our puck preparation. If you don't prepare your puck well, you'll actually be getting a wet puck from channeling issues or floating pucks or other issues. So you have to eliminate the variables. You need to be following a recipe. Some tools that will really help are a WDT, an NCD, and just good technique. We want to make sure that the coffee is evenly flowing through the bed of coffee, and that is helping us to be able to get the right grind, the right dose, and all these things. So before you even go into adjusting your recipe, make sure your puck prep is really good. We've definitely got videos on how to improve your puck prep, so check them out. Now dose. Dose is probably the most obvious one. Dose is the amount of coffee in your basket, so let's make sure we've got the right amount of coffee in the basket for the basket that you've got. If you have an 18 gram basket, you can fit up to 19.5 grams in that basket. Our recipe is a 22.5 gram dose in a 21 gram basket. So we make sure that we get a good amount of dose in there that allows for a good amount of expansion, but also if there is not enough coffee in the basket, you'll be leaving room in the basket for movement. And you've got to allow, you've got to be aware that if your dose is quite low and there's pressure, your puck might be moving around inside that basket, and that's not going to help. It's going to break up the particles. That might be giving you a wet puck. So making sure your dose is good, obviously for the flavor that you're after, but let's make sure that we've got the right dose for the right basket. If you are overdosing, you might find that you're actually damaging your baskets to the point that they can even explode because there's too much coffee in there and you're pushing too much pressure through, maybe when you're tamping, and you can also damage your shower screens. So getting your dose right is not only for your extractions, but for your equipment too. So at this point, I have to talk about expansion. Expansion is probably one thing that I didn't find a lot of content on when researching for this video and finding out that people aren't really considering expansion now. Expansion is the swelling of the coffee as water is added to it. This has a huge impact on the extraction itself. If you're dialing in, you really need to consider expansion, and this is affected by the freshness of the coffee, how freely the water flows through, whether it expands, whether it creates back pressure on the machine that doesn't allow the water to go through. And then when you turn the shot off, or when the extraction's finished, there is an amount of pressure release that can actually have an effect on the puck itself. It can force the puck back up, it might stick to the shower screen, it'll send water underneath, you'll get an uneven extraction. But expansion is a big consideration with how much dose you've got, what your grind is, and it's definitely a consideration to think about how much room there is in the basket to allow the coffee to expand or not. And that can have a huge impact on whether you're getting wet pucks or dry puck. Something that can help with expansion is playing around with pre-infusion. If you're on a home machine, you're manually doing it. If you're on a commercial machine, we want to set up some pre-infusion. Pre-infusion acts like a bloom, so you'll get a drop of water. Some machines are more like a pre-wet. They'll actually just wet the puck, give it a second to saturate the grounds across the top, give it an even flow through the bed of coffee, but they might also help with the expansion, so that when you hit it, you're not getting that extra back pressure. So I'd play with your pre-infusion. That might be helpful with your expansion issues. Now, if you want to see something really cool, check out the videos on YouTube when you search transparent portafilter. There's some videos there just showing how the coffee reacts with different grind settings, with different doses inside a see-through basket. So you can see how the coffee is reacting and you can tell what's really happening inside the puck. We'll put a link to a video that I really liked, I found really helpful, in the description below. Like I said, it's super common to see a puck actually stuck to a shower screen, which sucks. You pull out your portafilter, there's nothing in your handle, and then all of a sudden, your whole wet puck lands on the drip tray. You've got to pick it up. Don't just wash it into the drip tray. You're just going to clog your drain line. You want to actually pick that up and get rid of it. So why is it happening? I think it's because of the expansion that's happening inside the puck, as well as potentially an underdosed coffee. If you're getting the extraction ends, you get that suck back through the machine and you've got a low dose, you might find that it's actually pulling the puck off the bottom of the basket and it's sending it straight up to the shower screen, and because the puck is so wet from having that low dose, it just sticks. So consider upping your dose and working on your recipe a little bit more to try to get around that issue. Now, grind is probably the first thing most people think about when they talk about wet pucks. A coarse grind can make the water that run through really quickly and it will move around and it could be sloppy for that reason. But you've got to remember that you've got to compensate with your dose. So even if you have a coarse grind and a high dose, maybe the extraction will still be slow. Much like if you have a fine grind and the water can't get through, you might end up with a puddle of water on top, or it takes so long for the water to get through, it's actually just still sitting inside the coffee, especially if you have a high dose and a fine grind. But even if you have a low dose and a fine grind, you might still find that you're getting those, you'd definitely be getting wet pucks because of how sloppy that actually is. So working on your recipe, adjusting your dose and your grind at the same time is still a crucial part of it. With all that said, don't forget that the tools you're using and how much force you're putting on when you're tamping is also going to play a part in how hard that puck is. At the end of the day, we're trying to get the water through in a good amount of time for the extraction and for the flavor, but make sure that if you're tamping really hard, you might not be allowing the water to get through, and that could actually be the issue. Or maybe you're tamping too light and the water's able to flow through too freely and it's loosening up the particles, and inside the basket there's just coffee moving around a lot, and that's why you might be getting wet pucks. There's another really uncommon thing that people don't realize, and it's more of a tech thing, is that sometimes your solenoid can actually be leaking. You'll notice if you take your portafilter out for an amount of time, you might be getting a drip from the portafilter. I have noticed on some of the cheaper machines, or maybe just some of the machines that don't have great pressure management in their heads, they will actually not do a great job of turning the water off straight away. If you just run a shot, you're in a busy cafe, the shot's finished, and then you want to make another coffee and you take the handle out, you might find that there's still there might be a little bit of a drip afterwards, or maybe a solenoid is leaking and it's still dripping onto the bed of coffee after. So when you take your handle out and you've got a bit of water sitting on top, it might be more of a technical issue than your recipe. So I would make sure your machines are maintained, and an easy way to fix your solenoids or make sure that they don't block up over time or start leaking is just thorough cleaning. We want to do a good chemical backflush every single day to avoid those issues. All right, so I feel like I've said the word recipe 100 times already, but that's really what we're building here. We want to make a recipe that suits you, and yield has to be considered. Now, yield is the amount of liquid that's going into the cup. So we use a traditional kind of ristretto 1-to-1 yield. So our 22.5 grams of dose that we're putting in our basket is going to give us 22.5 grams of yield in our cup. We also use the normal extraction 1-to-2 ratio, and that's as far as we go. We don't use a Longo 1-to-3 or anything else. We're happy with the flavor that we get out of a 1-to-2. Now, I also know that if I push past that 1-to-2, I might find that I'm putting a lot of extra water through my puck, and the puck's exhausted. It's already had all the water gone through it as much to get all the coffee out. Now we're just basically churning water through it, and that might be the reason your pucks are getting a bit sloppy, and because you're actually getting too much water through that bed of coffee. So let's make sure our yields are on point. So whatever your recipe is, if it's 18 grams, let's not run it for more than 36 grams out. This is just on a basic medium to dark roast coffee, but we want to make sure that our yields are right. Just be mindful that if you're running a ristretto, if you don't run the full extraction to the 1-to-2 ratio and you take the handle out, you will find the puck will be just holding a lot more water than normal because it's the full amount of water hasn't saturated through the puck. So be mindful if you're anything less than that 1:2 ratio, you will also be holding a certain amount of water still inside the puck. If you really want to test this, I do recommend using our Champion blend. Go 22.5 grams in a 21 gram basket. We want to have pre-infusion on, be trying to hit a 30 to 32 second extraction, and we're going to get that 45 grams of yield out. Now that coffee will be roasted fresh here at Artisti, and it will be delivered to you within the week, and you can test it within that 7 to 28 days window to make sure the coffee tastes great and the extraction is perfect to the recipe that we recommend. So if you've got all your elements of your recipe together, that's the best way to test it, is with great coffee. All right, so at the end of the day, what really matters? Do I really care? No, not really. If I taste your coffee and it tastes great, I don't really care about your puck. Your puck is not the determination of your extraction being good. Your recipe isn't really either. If your coffee tastes good and you know that that's what you wanted to achieve, you can have a sloppy puck. I don't care. Just make sure the coffee tastes good. If you're not happy with your sloppy pucks and you're finding that you're getting watery or under extracted coffees, up your dose. You might find the flavors improved and you get a firmer puck, and you might be happy with that. If you like a rich, dark coffee and you're used to running longer shots and that's the flavor profile you want, you might like it old school. You might like the bigger dose, and your pucks will be dry and you'll have indents of your shower screen screw in the top, and that's your style of coffee. Now remember that coffee, we love all the different flavors of coffee, so don't get hung up on the wet puck, dry puck. Don't worry about the cake. Obviously from a making coffee point of view, it's not ideal to have wet, sloppy puck. You got to clean up. But if you're happy with the flavor of your coffee, that's okay. You can adjust. There is going to be lots of moving parts to making coffee. All the things I've spoken about, age and degassing and all these things. But at the end of the day, if you're happy with the taste of your coffee, don't get hung up on the wet pucks. Just keep going and keep enjoying coffee. Now, what are your pucks like? Are you at home? Are you in a cafe? Is there a go-to for the style of puck that you like or that you get from the extractions that you normally do? Has anything I've mentioned in this video helped you? I'd love to know if you've gone back and made coffee. Let us know if there's anything that I've mentioned that's been able to resolve some issues you've been having, or if you can improve the coffee and what impact that has on your puck. If there's anything I've missed, I'd love to hear it. Put in the comments below. We love to reply to them and read them all. And we appreciate you coming. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, go back and look at all the videos we've done. There's heaps on everything I've talked about: dose, yield, grind, machines, technical things, understanding puck defects, channeling. All this coffee content is here to make you a better barista, whether you're at home or in a cafe. So thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.